Hello, and welcome to this episode of the Tangent Podcast.
Hello, hello.
Pink episode where we are mixing stuff up.
I have yet another different background.
Yeah,
Recording from another undisclosed new location.
yeah, we're working on it.
Yeah,
Hopefully
don't.
things still look kind of pretty.
Yeah.
But yeah, we have more ideas of what we're gonna do. So, for example, today I am burning a candle, and I want to talk more about candles that we're burning because I love candles. I have a deep fascination and love for burning candles because it just makes your room smell better, and good
Right.
smells good for the brain. I
Yeah.
don't have
Yeah.
any kind of science to back that up with like I usually do, but it makes me feel good, and so I'm using examples,
Well,
evidence.
it creates an overall environment. I was watching a video earlier this week where it was talking about like haunted houses, and when you go and visit haunted houses, that from the moment that you walk in you immediately start to feel creeped out. And
Hmm.
part of that atmosphere that they build is there's a scent. There's a scent that a lot of professional haunted houses have that gets them to smell a certain way. Like I didn't finish the article, but so I don't know what that scent is. But
Hmm.
I've been to a few like haunted Halloween walks and stuff like that. And Halloween is this Monday if you're watching this live.
Yeah.
You know, so but it got me thinking like, whoa, that's interesting how we use sense to build an environment.
Hmm.
And all throughout history people have done this. I mean, how often do uh religious or places that holy places burn
Yeah,
incense?
burning incense,
You
burning
know, and
candles.
that's universal across multiple belief
Okay,
systems,
question
right?
though. What do
Yeah.
church candles smell like?
Oh, there's so many jokes in there, but I'm gonna choose to not make any of them.
Depends if they're
Anyway,
Roman churches or not.
yeah, it does. It depends. That wasn't even all the churches,
And you know what? That joke is
or all the
gone.
jokes.
That joke is gone forever.
Listen,
It's not gone forever. It's saved on my computer, but it's gone from the internet currently, as far as I know.
that's totally fine. That's
um,
100% fine. But no, it builds
but
an
anyway,
environment.
yeah.
Like nobody wants to take a moment. Like imagine you're taking a moment and you're relaxing and you're getting quiet and it's the first quiet that you've had in a week. And maybe I'm talking about my own personal experience this last couple of weeks and maybe I am not. But you finally get there and then all of a sudden your dog just rips a silent one and you don't hear it, but just slowly that dog poop scent just
Yeah, it just
wafts
permeates.
into your nose and it permeates your calm and your settle.
Hmm.
Your whole like peace is now disrupted. So creating an environment that is restful, smell has so much to do with it.
Yeah.
Like not, I mean, there's a lot of other things that go into it, but I think smell especially has a lot to do with it because you could always close your eyes and not look at the world around you.
Hmm.
But you can't really close your nose.
You can't close your nose. That's true. And we could like at some point talk more
Make
about
that a
like,
t-shirt.
well, I was gonna say talk more about like candles and meditation and that kind of stuff because I've always found that like burning candles helps with meditation. I love meditation. I have not been doing it
Mhm,
of late, but like one of the times where I've personally felt like the healthiest in terms of
mhm,
like
mhm,
mental health, physical health, whatever, all three of the healths combined,
mhm.
was when I was meditating constantly.
Right.
Um,
And that's a good segue into our tri-weekly check-in.
well, okay, before we do that, I'm
Oh,
pumpkin cheesecake cookies. That's the candle that I'm
ooh,
burning. That's the smell.
pumpkin cheese. I need to go out and buy a candle now.
Yeah.
Pumpkin cheesecake
Yeah,
cookies. That's a
I'm
good
burning a
candle.
candle. I kind of sprung this on you last minute of this idea that I had of like going over candles that we're burning. But this pink episodes are going to be more. transformed into talking about the spirit. And speaking of which, that's a good segue into our tri-weekly
Tri-weekly
check-in.
check-in. Yeah. So
Yeah.
last week we did a tri-weekly check-in in regards to the body, and we each shared something that we wanted to start doing
Mm-hmm.
for the betterment of our bodies,
Towards our physical health.
towards our physical health. And if you want to know what those things were, you can go back and listen to last week's episode, because right now we're going to talk about goal setting to talk about our spiritual health,
Yes.
or that other, we'll call it, the
that
thing
other
that is
thing.
very hard to quantify,
Mhm.
that makes up the psyche of human beings.
Right. That
Right.
could be like emotional health, your mental health in terms of like mental wellness, not necessarily mental health as in like, because we use mind as our other thing that we talk
Right.
about.
And that's more, when we talk about mind, we more talk about stretching the brain
Yeah.
and exercising intellect. This is more resting your mind.
Yeah.
And releasing tension.
You know,
So
like
I'm gonna
depression, bipolar, those things. That's the kind of thing. Those are the kind of things that we're trying to avoid with mental wellness.
for lack of using a catchy, buzzword term, self-care.
Yeah, self-care, exactly.
Self-care. So what is the goal that you have set for yourself for the spirit?
That I have set. That's a good question.
Yeah. I mean, I
was
could go
thinking about
first,
this.
but
No, yeah, I was thinking about this, and I guess I can. It's kind of a cop out answer, because I was just talking about meditation and how I want to meditate more. But yeah, I'm gonna use the cop out answer. I want to meditate more. I want to find myself getting more into a. I don't want to use the word ritual, but like a ritual
habit,
I guess, is better. A better word.
Build those healthy habits.
Yes, Atomic Habits. That was I think the name of the book that we talked about that one time.
Yeah, that might also not exist anymore.
It totally doesn't. It totally is. But we could talk about it again at some point.
We could.
Yeah, meditating more in like a consistent way. So like at a specific time for X amount of minutes. I used to be able to go for like 15 minutes. Just straight.
So let me ask you, like when you meditate, right? Because like that is a word. Yeah. That is a word that is, it's got a lot of baggage.
It does.
It's got a lot of connotations,
and we normally, I've realized that we use to talk about ourselves carry lots of baggage.
Right. But I was going to say we usually try to steer clear of words that carry those types of weights, but I'm tired of that. I want to just start using the words, and then if we need to, start explaining that we mean the original meaning or the literal meaning, or just to define what we mean.
Well, so when meditate doesn't have that much baggage, all things. There's definitely other words that have more baggage than the word meditate. I feel like meditate nowadays,
for sure.
All of the focus on like self-care and that kind of stuff has less baggage and less of a specific connotation that it implies. But to define what I mean by that.
Right. For our dear listener, maybe we have someone who has never even considered meditating because it sounds like this super higher up thing that is just, well, I'm not the type of person who meditates. So let's talk specifics and examples for ourselves. So when you plan on meditating, what do you mean by that? What does that look like?
So it's just a point. It's a point in the day or a point of time where you drop everything that is on your plate. So if you have something that you're working on for work, let go of that. Let it go. It doesn't exist anymore. If you have some sort of exterior stress, you just had a fight with your girlfriend, let go of that. Doesn't exist. It's just you. It's just you and your own thoughts about how you pick. Like, I'd like to take it as a thought, as like a way of like how I want to picture myself. So it's just, a quiet time to marinate, for lack of a better way of putting it, on what you want to see yourself do, your goals. Generally, you can do it in a dark room because it can help. A lot of the things with meditation are done specifically because you want to hone specific things. I don't know if you've heard this, but people who are blind typically have better senses of smell and hearing because they've lost a sense. They've lost the sight of their eyes. And while you could get into a whole argument of like whether meditation is channeling some sixth sense, I don't want to get into that. I just look at it as a way of channeling something within yourself and focusing. It's just a way of focusing. And so if you do it in like a dark room, if you have a specific candle or something that you burn, it can help you focus. And so you want to just keep focusing on either the quiet and being mindful of where you are in this moment, specifically, which is a lot of what meditation is about, is just being mindful. That's how you can start to approach that.
Right. I'm pausing here because this is actually mine as well, but coming at it from a little bit of a different angle. I think it's another reason why a lot of, especially for like Americans, but really everybody, just speaking in the context of where we live and that we are in, like dark rooms, quiet places, there's nothing necessarily more spiritually powerful about those things. We just are more distractible as beings than we used to be.
Yeah.
And unless you have years of experience in practice meditation, and when we say mindfulness, I like the Thich Nhat Hanh, who wrote a bunch of texts on Buddhism and things. Whenever he defines mindfulness as being present wherever you are. So if you're washing dishes, you're not thinking about anything except I'm washing these dishes. If you're eating a meal, you're not thinking about what you're going to do after dinner. You're being mindful is thinking about the flavors in each one of those bites. It's only being present. So that's what I mean when we talk about mindfulness. But that's really hard to do when you're moving. So the easier thing to do is just to start removing as many distraction variables as you can, and then sitting and start small. So we've talked about it all the time, but I do this twice a week. I have an online Kung Fu class. And on Wednesdays, when I meet privately with my Sifu, is we practice technique, like what people would refer to as the cool stuff, where like I actually get to like learn how to punch and hit, punch and kick and all the palm changes that my Kung Fu body is not ready to do yet. But then on Saturday is a group class where we basically just we do meditative exercises. And so we did this one thing last week, and he refers to it as a tendon stretch. And he always says, you never tense your muscles, right? You never tense your muscles and hold things, but instead you set and you let, you let the flesh hang on your skeleton, like your skeleton is a hanger and your flesh is a coat. And so we do this, and then we do this tendon stretch with our fingers, and we start at our fingers. I gotta remember where my camera is. I'm holding my fingers out in front of me. I'm not holding my hands open, but I'm placing my hands so that the tendons and the joints of each of my fingertips aren't like contracted, because we carry a lot of like weight with us and tension with us that builds throughout the day, and like we don't even realize it, like how much our posture drops just naturally from the things that irritate us. And so on Saturday, it's the practice of, you start with your hands and then you try to open up the tendons in your wrist. And this isn't like a mystical thing. This is literally body mechanics and trying to hold your things out. And we did it. And then he asked us, like, how was that? What were you thinking? What were your thoughts? And I was like, honestly, it was really hard for me to do, because remember, we're standing and I'm trying to then move this openness of my joints throughout my entire body. Oh, I got it. Like, I got it everywhere a few times. And I was like,
it's really hard to find that state of
even when
the entire body.
but even when I had it, just in the certain places, I was like, you know what? It was almost like my body had this moment of, this is what I'm supposed to feel like.
Mhm.
This is not what I feel like all the time, but this rest,
You ever get a
this is what my
massage,
body.
like a really
Yes.
good
Yeah.
massage, and you get
Yeah.
up and you're just like, wow, this is
Right.
what feeling good feels like.
This
I
was
would
exactly
like
what it
stuff like
was.
that. Yeah.
And I was like, this is what I want.
Mhm.
And then we looked at the time, we had stood. We were doing standing meditation for 53 minutes. And so my goal is I want to start doing that as a daily practice, just 5 minutes a day.
Mhm.
Even if it's not standing, but even sitting and focusing on stretching and opening my joints so that I'm not all like scrunched up tight
Yeah.
up across my chest and shoulders. Even just dropping your shoulders, opening up your chest and rounding your back just to feel the tendon stretch
Mhm.
of your muscles here so that you're not contracted. Like it's almost as if you can feel the blood flowing better. And I gotta tell you, like I've said like a bunch of times, and I'm very aware of it right now, and it's bothering me. But I've never felt so good.
Mhm.
So that's what I want to do.
Mhm.
That's my thing for the next 3 weeks is I'm going to try to do it for five. We all got 5 minutes a day.
Yeah. Five
We all
minutes is
got
not that
5 minutes,
much.
5 minutes a day, and it'll help me with my previous body tri-weekly check-in, which I'm not going to say because you can go back and listen to the other episode. Because the whole point of the style of kung fu, the bagua, is you want to be that relaxed when you're moving and fighting.
Right.
So in order to get there, I got to start doing it sitting down.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
if it took me 53 minutes to finally find it, or 40 minutes to find it for the last 13 minutes,
Mhm.
well, that's not going to be very helpful in a combat situation. I got to
Right.
I got to be better at finding it like in 10 seconds.
Mhm.
Like quickly just drop into that resting state. And then aside from that, it's just a good practice. I felt great, and I want to feel great again.
Listen, if there's any like brain people, neurologists, neuroscience people who listen to this podcast and want to tell me exactly why my brain feels good when my muscles feel relaxed, please come help. Because as
Yeah.
you were talking, I was like, I wonder what actually makes you feel good. Like, what chemicals are being released when my muscles
Yeah.
are not tense? That my brain is like, yes, give me more of those.
My hope is that I would think it'd be great if one day we could have someone like that as a guest
That's what I meant.
on our
Yeah.
podcast,
That's
and
what
and
that's what I meant. I
and,
was like, it'd be awesome.
and
Just
we could
tell
just
me, teach me. I want to learn.
we could just shut up and
Yeah.
sit here, right? That'd
I'll just
be
like ask two questions and then zip my mouth for the rest of the episode
yeah.
and just listen to
hmm
them talk.
hmm
I'd love it. But anyway, back to what our goals for today, or after our goals for today, what we
Yeah.
were thinking about of talking about today for the podcast.
Right.
Axioms. That was what I had. We had phone called at one point. And I don't remember
Yeah.
what
It
the
was last Sunday.
context of it
Yeah.
was, but I had asked that question of like, how do we build, create, or find our own axioms?
hmm
And I was like,
hmm
that'd be a good idea for the podcast. Let's talk about that. And we might go somewhere else, like we tend to do with tangents, but I want to start at that point and kind of flesh out that idea of like, what is, an axiom in terms of like your own self? Because anyone
hmm
who has done mathematics might think, oh, axiom means this. And you're right, it does. It has that definition in that domain. But we're talking more the domain of like your own personal axioms, your own personal beliefs. And yeah, that's like kind of how you can define it as like a basic belief or a basis belief of yourself. Or of ourself, and how do we build them? How do you build your axioms, Victor?
Well, I mean, you got to start with a place,
Mm-hmm.
right? Um, you know, and you say right here, you start with a base belief. But honestly, I think before an axiom is even conceived, before something becomes a belief,
Mhm.
it almost has to start as a problem or a question. Like when I say problem, I don't mean like I mean something that can be questioned,
Right.
right? So
A dilemma.
yeah, like a dilemma. So let's talk about a belief, that um
Well, I
human
guess.
life,
Okay.
right?
Yeah.
Human life has value.
Hmm.
That's an axiom of mine because you asked me a question.
Yeah.
So
Yeah. Yeah.
so human life has value. So how do I go back and how did I come to that conclusion? Because that axiom has connotations that are hard,
Right.
right? So before I can talk about those connotations, we want to talk about how those things are,
Well, I also like the
like how those
way.
things come to be.
Yeah, I like the way that it was defined because you said a question.
Hmm.
There has to be first a question before you can come up with an axiom.
Hmm.
And in like the definition I found from Wikipedia, because we don't do that much research for these kinds of episodes, but it is a good starting place.
Right.
It's an axiom, a postulate, or an assumption. And
Hmm.
so
Okay.
to go back to your um, human life has value as an axiom, I
Hmm.
like personally I like the idea of, for myself, asking a question. So does human life have value?
Hmm.
And then saying, assuming that it does, and there's your axiom right there. You
Right.
assume that
Yeah.
human life has value.
Hmm.
You want to
So
operate under that assumption, or you want to have that
right.
postulate of like, to answer this question, I'm saying, let's say that human life has value. And then you
Yeah.
keep that, or I keep that, and I say to myself, this is the assumption that I'm operating under. And so any
Hmm.
other kind of conversation or thought or even other question that I might have for myself, I'm going to operate under that assumption. You kind of have to build them up,
Yeah.
because I use the word basis for a reason, because you have to
Mhm.
have axioms in order to build other axioms, but you want to try to like boil down your assumptions and keep track of what it is that you're assuming, because
So
then you can
right.
start to, or I can start to form better opinions derived
So
off of
so
those.
we talked about this
Yeah.
in our meeting, that Socrates quote by Plato, and I
Mm-hmm.
say it that way because in none of Socrates' writings do you ever find this quote, but in
It's also often
Plato,
attributed to him. It's not actually something as like said by him.
right, Plato recorded it in one of his books
Yeah.
saying that Socrates said it, was that an unexamined life isn't worth living.
Mm-hmm.
I heard that years ago in high school, and it's haunted me. I'll say it. It's haunted me for years because it's a hard thing to swallow. But going back to all human life has value, right? That axiom of belief. Now we're not talking about the connotations of that. We're just talking about how that has become an axiom of mine. Because
Mm-hmm.
what happens a lot of the times is that some people will take their axioms and present them to you. Okay. And this happens a lot. Like I grew up in the Judeo-Christian church,
Mm-hmm.
right? In Western Christian culture, you grew up similarly, right? I would say that you deviated
I definitely
first.
deviated a lot earlier. I
Right.
deviated like fifth grade.
Right. But see, only physically and visibly, because and I'm about to explain that why is
Mm-hmm.
because so what happens a lot of the times in any religious setting, we're not just talking about Christianity, I'm talking about any time a parent has a child and they rear that child up in their religious context. A lot of the times what religion technically is it's a systems of beliefs that are handed down generation to generation. So a lot of
Mm-hmm.
times what happens is those axioms, right? That
Yep.
that pair that those parents operate off of are just given to the children and are said these things are right.
Or yeah,
No,
they're
no, 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 no. Period. These
yeah.
things are right. Believe them.
Mm-hmm.
My parents, however, said these are the things that we believe. We encourage you to search out why. So when my father told me all life has human value. This is why he caveated it. There was a comma, not a period. He said, this is why I believe that. What do you think about that? You go discover it about yourself. And
Mhm.
see, it's that unexamined life. And so I maybe not deviated, even though some people would say that I have.
Mhm.
But you would even say that I'm more traditionally religious according to how we were raised than you are,
Oh yeah,
right? But other
for
people would
sure.
completely disagree with you.
Right.
But the thing is that the reason why we don't have a problem talking about this, even in our private conversation, is that that I at least know that these are my beliefs and that they're mine. No one has
Right.
handed me something and said, this is what we believe. And I just said, okay,
Well, that's
right? I
something
at
else that
least
I try to
take
want
that
to. I
and
think.
walk and pull it apart
Yeah.
myself.
Yeah. Um, and like going off of that, like one of the things that I try to focus on in myself is like taking an axiom, taking an assumption, and setting that aside. Being able to
Mm-hmm.
say, because there's, I think going back to the parental thing,
Mm-hmm.
if something is presented to you as a fact instead of an assumption, I think kids are pretty smart. They can tell the difference between things that are being told to them as a guess versus, because an assumption is a guess. An
Mm-hmm.
assumption is just a guess. A postulate is just a guess at something. It's a guess at answering your question. And I think that kids are
And
pretty smart that they can detect the difference between whether it's something you're guessing at and something that's being
mhm.
told to them, right?
and I would say that like a guess isn't foolish. Like I think a lot of the times,
It's an
a lot of the
estimation, I'll
times,
say.
a- I like that word better because a lot of the times we hear guess and we just think, oh, you're just guessing. Well, Sherlock Holmes just guesses all of the time,
I had a
right?
whole class, speaking of fifth grade, in fifth grade, about in my fifth grade science class, about the difference between a guess and estimation and how they're really not different. They're
Right.
the same. They're pretty much the same thing. An estimation is just a guess. It's just a guess with that is like knowledgeable, and you're just putting
Right.
emphasis on that. That's it.
And
Again,
and
but you're still guessing, and you can still guess with knowledge.
we talk about the scientific method often,
Yeah.
even sometimes on this podcast, and the scientific method has guesses
Mm-hmm.
in there all the time, but we just don't call them that because we don't like how the word sounds.
Right.
You know, what is a hypothesis? It's an educated estimation of what could be happening.
Mm-hmm.
And then all of the experimentation is just based off of assumptions of if I do this, I'm thinking this is going to happen. Oh, it didn't happen. Why did this happen instead of what I wanted to? Those are all guesses. Those are all estimations based on the information that you have gathered yourself.
Right.
And I think that's where building axioms begins is you cannot build an axiom without gathering information yourself. I don't think axioms can be handed down.
No, I don't think so either. You can hand
You
down
can
information, and that's why I wanted to make a distinction between the two, because you can hand
Mhm.
down information and you can give someone your assumptions. Like I can tell you, like I can say, "Hey Victor, this is what I'm assuming based off of this
Mhm.
question," because I think that is what's common between all of us is we all have that question. We can agree on the question. It's the answer
Mhm.
that's hard. Or I'll say most times humans are really good at agreeing on what the question is.
Mhm.
How do we protect our posterity? That's a question that a lot of people can agree on. Our assumptions, assuming that we do this, assuming that we do X, I
Mhm.
can answer that question, right? That's where the disagreements happen, is right there. And so what I try to do, and especially I think that's the reason why you and I can have conversations that we both like strictly disagree with each other on, is
Mhm.
because we can take our axioms, our assumptions, and set them aside and say, okay, I'm going to operate under your assumptions. I'm not changing
Mhm.
my own assumptions. I'm just operating under yours to try to see things from your perspective. Even if I completely disagree with it, right? I'm still taking what you are guessing. I'm taking your guess and saying, okay, let me follow your guess. Let me follow your guess down this line of reasoning. Are you taking a note?
No, you cut out for a second.
Oh, yeah, we're on Discord. We're not in the same room, so internet is a
So
thing.
no, I
But
got you though. I got you.
yeah, yeah, yeah.
Yeah, it's yeah. So I think that if we all understand that axioms You can give someone information to set them down a path,
Hmm.
but then you have to let them find their path.
Yeah.
And I'm going to say this. If there's a parent listening or who will listen to this at some time, I've worked a lot. I ran youth programs for multiple different organizations and nonprofits for years of my life.
Hmm.
So I'm going to say this. If you're a parent and your child who is older than the age of 10, and that's being super generous because I think that kids start to gain
Right.
sentience and their own free thought, free
Very hand
thinking
wavy.
will. Yeah, age of 10,
Yeah.
very hand wavy.
Hmm.
Um, and if your child chooses a different axiom than you, that's that is not your failing as a parent or as a human.
Hmm.
That is your child being a human
Right.
and being allowed to exercise their own free will. Your failing as a human is how you treat them after they decide to live their life by a different axiom.
Hmm.
Because I've
And
not been a
yeah,
parent.
I
I
say
don't know
neither of us are
either.
parents. We have not had
Right.
that
Right.
experience, so
But I understand as
yeah.
best as I can the feelings. But but I've seen way too many times parents, and this isn't just in like, I'm not just talking religious axioms. I'm talking about like you need to be a straight A student in school. That's an axiom,
Right.
right? You need to get to an Ivy League college in order to be successful. That's an axiom.
Okay,
I don't have
question.
those axioms.
What
What?
is what or question of a question? What is the question that those axioms are answering? Just because I'm curious to see what you come up with. You need to
Um,
be a straight A student. What axiom is that? What assumption is that from? What are you assuming to be true?
that I would say that the assumption of that being a straight A student is um what can I do in order to have the best chance to, this is another hand wavy word,
Yeah.
but to be successful in life. And then
Hmm.
you have to talk about how you define success,
Right, but I would
which
agree with you. I would agree with you that that is what that was what I was thinking. Is like, how do you
yeah,
succeed? How do you
right.
find
But
success?
that's the thing
You
is
be a
that
straight A student.
those things,
Hmm.
right, can't be given to a kid, another person who has free will. My axioms can't be your axioms. You and I have asked ourselves the exact same questions and come up with different, sometimes similar but
Hmm.
very different axioms, and that's fine.
I think you can have. I mean, you can have the same axioms. You can agree with like
Absolutely.
you can
But
agree
they
with your parent that is handing this to you. It's just you need to come to the conclusion, or it's better to come to the conclusion yourself. So,
right,
as someone
you need
who
to come to the
is,
conclusion. It's not better. I'm gonna interrupt you. It's not
mhm,
better to come to the conclusion yourself. It's until you have examined life, the unexamined life isn't worth living, and that axiom that your parent handed you becomes yours.
mhm,
It's not really your axiom, it's a rule. And rules, nobody follows them. Or we
right.
only follow them as in
We
as
love
far
how
as
to
we
find
think that
ways
we're
to
gonna
break
get
them.
punishing.
Yeah,
Right. We follow
humans
them
love
so we don't
finding
get punished.
ways. Yeah, yeah, yeah. I
How
think
many
just from
times
like
do you drive the speed limit?
just from like I don't want to say pseudo psychological, but from like what I've gleaned from psychology is that
Hmm.
things don't like getting negative rewards, and what happens when you break a rule, you get a negative reward, and
I
so
was I was
like,
just talking I was talking to my buddy John about this. He who is a parent.
mhm,
He has a stepdaughter and then two sons of his own,
mhm,
right? And like we were talking about parenting, and I love John a lot because he understands my heart, he understands my perspectives, and he lets me have parenting conversations with him,
mhm,
even though I am not a parent, because he respects my perspective and I respect the fact that I'm not a parent and he is, so his
mhm,
perspective's completely different and based in different and more accurate information of actually waking up and having a kid there every
yeah,
day,
yeah,
right? So we have those conversations, and we were talking about discipline.
Mm-hmm.
right? And how we grew up with discipline. And it was so funny. I laughed at some point in the conversation, not to get into all of it, because it was like a 2 hour conversation. And it was like everything comes back to you can either listen to me because I love you and you love me, or you can listen to me because you're afraid of me.
Mm-hmm.
And I made the statement that fear gets you the results sooner, but is way more shaky.
Yeah.
Whereas if
Yeah.
where someone listening to you out of love, it's more painful for you. It takes longer.
Mm-hmm.
It's frustrating, not for the person who's disobedient. It's frustrating for the person trying to get obedience.
Mm-hmm.
But you get that person, because we're talking in the context of kids, you
Mm-hmm.
get that person to believe you because they love you. That person's going to always be on your side for things, even when they disagree with you
Well, I
on
also think
things.
that the latter will
Hmm.
not get you the result, is less likely to get you the result that you want. So
Oh, absolutely.
the thing that you have in your head of, so let's come up with a question, right?
Hmm.
So what is the question that you as a parent are asking yourself about your kid?
Okay. Um,
Like, how does my child be
and let's
happy in
and let's
life? How does my
yeah,
child be
let's
successful? Let's define this.
let's I was gonna say let's also put the caveat that we are two not
Oh yeah,
parents
we're not
having
parents.
this
No, yeah, yeah,
conversation,
yeah.
you know?
But
But I
as
always
someone
thought
who is taught, like I've
so
tutored on the side, I've taught people
let's
just in
let's
instructions,
let's do
I've
the
instructed.
100. Let's look at this from the
Yeah,
100% benefit of the doubt, best case scenario.
right.
The question that I believe a parent is asking
Mm-hmm.
is, what can I instill in my child so that they do not so that they can be self-sufficient and don't die,
Okay,
right?
okay. I can agree with that question. I think it's good.
Because I think
It's a
that's a
good
good
formulation.
overarching it's a good overarching question.
Mm-hmm.
And the best as a parent, you would want to raise your child. I almost said so that they don't need you, but I think that everyone wants to be needed.
I think as a
And
parent, that's a better way of having. That's a better goal to
and
have.
like for me, my father my father and I have a very good relationship. I'm blessed by that.
Mm-hmm.
I don't take that for granted at all. We've had our rough moments, we've had our disagreements and things like that. We don't see eye to eye on everything. However, I don't need my father the
Mm-hmm.
way that I needed him as a 5 year old.
Right,
I would still say I need my father in my life.
right.
He brings something into my life,
Mm-hmm.
but it changes. So he called me. I still remember this to this day. He called me on my 21st birthday. I was working at a summer camp in the Adirondack Mountains, and he's like, "You're an adult now. You have been raised. I'm done." And I'm like, "I'm sorry, what?" Weirdest birthday conversation I've ever had in my life. He's
Mm-hmm.
like, "You have been raised. I'm done raising you. I am no longer your father. We are now just two adult men.
Mm-hmm.
If you want to have a relationship with me, I'd love to be your friend. I could always use more friends. I like who you've become as an adult man.
Mm-hmm.
And I want to be your friend, but we don't know what that looks like yet. And we're going to have to figure that out, and it's going to be weird."
Mm-hmm.
That's a crazy good conversation for a father to have with his adult son.
Yep, I
Like
agree.
I didn't realize it at the time, but in my mind, right? That's where I came up with that question. That had to be the question that my father continuously asked himself as he was building axioms for which to raise us. Not that my dad would ever have been aware enough to call it any of that.
Right, right,
He's
right.
more of just he does prayerfully and thoughtfully and intellectually, but he doesn't dissect things the way that you and I do.
Mm-hmm.
And granted, he would also be the first person to say that he didn't always succeed when we were growing up, my sisters and I.
Mm-hmm.
I tell him stories of things that he used to teach us lessons, ways he disciplined us, and he'll laugh because we're adults now and we have these conversations. And he goes, "I did what to you? Wait, huh? When was this? I don't remember." He's like, "Well, you're not too messed up." Like,
Mm-hmm.
but that's good.
Yeah.
Like he has the maturity as an adult to realize that he was a kid with kids trying to figure life out.
Right.
I have the maturity as an adult to realize the same thing and to now look back and say, okay, this is what happened to me. I can't change it.
Right. How
So
do I move on from this?
how do I live as an adult who's had this experience
Hmm.
and I can either gain from it positively or I can live from it negatively. Ooh.
Right. Well, and like the other thing to go along with that is that just to stick with axioms, but also
Mhm.
go along with that same line of reasoning is that like you can change your axiom. It's not set in stone, right? As a kid living under your parents, I'm sure your assumptions to questions that they asked of like what am I doing? Um, I'm just trying to think of a good one. I don't want to say like do I love my parents, but like something along those lines, right? Or what kind of relationship do I want with my parents, right?
Mhm.
That assumption can change, and that's part of the point behind the conversation that your dad had with you, right? That can change, right? That idea can change. That assumption, that postulation can
Mhm.
change over time. It doesn't have to be set in stone. And I personally think it's better for it to change over time than for it to be set in stone.
Are you familiar with the concept of paradigms? Because I
Yeah,
think paradigms and axioms go hand in hand, and it's almost like
I've heard
talking about the
paradigm in
same
a
thing.
lot of different ways, so you have to be more
So,
specific.
so when I took a philosophy class,
Yeah,
Philosophy 101 at Brookdale Community College,
yeah.
one of the best teachers that I've ever had, we talked a lot about paradigms, and his idea is a paradigm is the contextual lens through which you view the world around you.
Okay.
Okay? And that lens is built, we use the term rules, is built off of a list of rules slash truths that you have discovered. I'm going to take the word rules and interject it with axioms.
Yeah.
We build our conceptual lens that we view reality
Mm-hmm.
with a set of axioms, and we will call that set of axioms
Oh, you use the word
a
set again.
paradigm. I know, I did it just for you.
Thanks.
And
I love sets.
we'll call that set of axioms a paradigm. Okay? Now, your paradigm is your lens. What happens when you discover that one of your axioms fails you? According to philosophical theory, you have to have what is known as a paradigm shift.
Mm-hmm.
Now, your lens is a complete thing structured around these axioms. You can't pull one axiom out, throw it, and interject a new one.
Right.
Think of it as a spyglass. You have to shatter it, deconstruct it completely, and then rebuild it. You can use a lot of the same axioms, but the concept of, and again, this is a philosophical theory concept from philosophy. A paradigm shift is when one of your axioms fails and your entire perspective and worldview radically shifts and
Mm-hmm.
has to be rebuilt. And so you do new axioms. I would say that paradigm shifts can be subtle or they can be loud. It just depends on what axiom breaks. I look at it
I
more as like a building.
right.
So if your foundational axiom is the one that breaks, yes, the whole thing goes down.
Mm-hmm.
But say if like you have a leaky shower head, right? That's your broken axiom. You don't got to tear the whole house down. You just have to kind of tear apart part of the bathroom and rearrange things and fix it in order to get things operating in this new way, or this more refined set of ideas.
I mean, it's a very like I don't want to say dramatic, but it's a very it's a it's a very physical way of looking at it. Um, I was thinking about it more abstractly, and I
Mm-hmm.
get what you're saying, and don't I don't quite see it that way, but I think that way is good and it works.
Mm-hmm.
Um, I am coming from just like literal mathematical sets, and so if a set is just a thing that is comprised of unique elements, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so any set of axioms will not be equal to another set of axioms if one of those elements is different. So if, let's say, the question is how to be successful, right? And my assumptions are I need to be a straight A student, I need to get a good job, and I need to have a wife and kids, right? Those are
Mm-hmm.
the axioms that make up that paradigm to answer the question. If I change one of those axioms, the set is the set slash paradigm, right? Because we're calling the set of axioms a paradigm. That paradigm is completely different. They're not equivalent. The two paradigms are not equivalent if one of those sets is different. If one of the elements of each set is different. And so that was how I was thinking about it, but
Mm-hmm.
it's definitely a way more abstract and not as easily digestible way of looking at it as a shower head breaking versus the foundation being cracked. And so I do like that formulation, not better, but I think it is a good way of looking at it for someone who doesn't think the way that I do.
Yeah, and see, it is dramatic, but at the same time, let's go back
Purposefully
to
so, though.
right. Let's go back to like religious settings.
Yeah.
And so I don't know if you've ever heard of this because you had kind of a different deviation of path.
Mm-hmm.
But there is this, so there was the evangelical movement, which is a movement within Western Christianity. There is going on right now. There is a term that they refer to as an ex-evangelical movement, and it's all the kids who were my age growing up we were kids like in the 90s, late 2000s or early 2000s, and we were handed a bunch of axioms from our decided religious belief set.
Mm-hmm. Axioms presented as facts.
Right. And none of us, or a lot of us, just accepted them.
Mm-hmm.
Didn't accept that the people, or weren't cognizant that the people handing them to us were also flawed people on the path just trying to figure it out as well. And those people didn't do it either.
Right.
And now have radically walked away from their faith or from the faith that they grew up in. Now, some of them are like me, who I still will talk to people about the God that I believe in, why I believe in him, the things that I've discovered about him, but they're all for me.
Right.
They're my experiential things. Or then there's other people who are just completely anti. I have a friend who is like this, is anti anything having to do from coming out of that system of belief, no matter whether it's good or bad.
Right.
Right? Because I think anyone on your best day would say that holding human life as having value is kind of a good base belief.
Yeah.
I shouldn't, that's the base belief that keeps you from throat punching someone just because they irritate you.
Right.
Oh, this person has human value. I shouldn't punch them just because I don't like their face. That's a good base belief.
Mm-hmm.
But I know people who will so call them ex-evangelicals, right? Because that's a term that is being used,
right.
Who even if a person in an organized Christian religious church says something good, will come against it just because there's a context in which the person is saying it.
Well, I think
so in this thing,
yeah.
well, to finish my thing, this is where my paradigm example of the foundational thing of the house shatters, because I think a lot of people, especially the people that I grew up in, the foundation of their house wasn't them seeking out this God that someone told them about. And I put it in air quotes because it's the God that I believe in. If you don't want to believe in him, sweet deal. We can still be friends. Like, that's how I view life, right? But they didn't seek the truths of that God.
Mm-hmm.
They chose to believe and build the foundation of their house or their axioms, their paradigm, on the specific religious organization that they were raised in. And when that specific religious organization fails them, their entire house falls down.
Yeah.
And then they have to rebuild. Right? Whereas, see, me, I worked for a couple of these organizations. I've been failed by a couple of these organizations. But they weren't the foundation of my paradigm. They were like a room.
Mhm.
So I went in with a sledgehammer, gutted the room,
Right.
and had to renovate.
Mhm.
And
Well,
it
I
was a
think,
sucky renovation,
yeah,
but it works.
yeah, for sure. And I think to just more quantify like how these things come about, like how these foundational things come about, and whatever. To take that same question of right, like do human beings have value?
Mm-hmm.
Even if everyone can assume that human beings do have value, what I think, at least I know that I do this. It's not subconsciously, but I think I'm more aware of the fact that I do this. I think that there are a lot of people who do this as well.
Mm-hmm.
To build more foundational axioms, right? You have
Mm-hmm.
to answer the question of what is value, right? The question of do human beings have value has more nested questions in there. What is
Right.
value? What
Axioms lead
what
to
are
other
human beings?
axioms.
Right. Well, that's why
Yes.
I use the word base belief, right? Is
Right.
because you start to there's a particle in there that's the particle that builds all particles, right? There's the Higgs
Mm.
boson axiom somewhere in there to people who get that reference.
I got it. I actually got it. I
Nice.
got that reference.
Um,
I know things about science sometimes.
don't you know anything about science?
Don't you know anything about science? Oh
Um,
my goodness.
but yeah, that I think once you get to that point, that's when you start to realize what is the foundation and what is the showerhead. Is once you start to ask more questions based off of a
Mm-hmm.
question. And I think that's for me personally, that's how I build my own more specific axioms to know where I
Right.
stand on certain topics and I know what to change. I know the parameters of my paradigms.
Right.
Is I have to ask, I have to ask myself like, what is value? Okay, well now I have to come up with another. Like you have to figure out what your assumptions are before you can realize what your assumptions are. It's that it sounds like such a stupid statement, but I think that there is some heart behind that. Um,
You want me to throw another crazy wrench in the middle of all this that I
sure,
think is great? And it's
I'm
not a
I am
wrench.
all for
I
it. I just want you
I
to know
think
that we're running a little low on time, but
no.
hit me with
It's
it.
not a wrench that will cause more conversation. It's a wrench that will be bothersome to certain people, and I love it. You can come to the same axiom with a different answer. So if my axiom of
Or from a different
and
question.
no.
Okay.
So here's the axiom, right? Right, that we started with.
Right.
All humans have value.
Mm-hmm.
Someone else can have arrived at that same axiom for a completely different reason than I have.
Right. I would
And
say
I've
from a
been
different set of questions, they can arrive at the same
it,
assumption.
exactly, because I have a specific reason which I have been very, very purposeful in not going into because
Right.
it's a completely different podcast, it's a completely different
Yeah, it's a completely
conversation,
different conversation. Yeah.
right? About why that's an axiom for me,
Mm-hmm.
why that's a belief that I hold. I know other people who do not believe other of my axioms, but
Mm-hmm.
who also have that axiom within their paradigm. And
There's
that is
there's an
how,
intersection.
yeah, there's an intersection in
Yes.
sets.
Yeah. Yeah. There you go. There you go.
But see, that is why
Set
I,
theory. I love that.
unlike some other people within the same faith belief that I am in,
Mm-hmm.
I can work. I work perfectly fine and get along very well with people who do not believe the same things that I do because I choose to focus on the things that we agree on and start there. And that's how you build relationships with people. Is you don't focus on the things, if you always focus on the things that you don't have in common, you're going to have a really crappy relationship with that person.
Yeah. And I think to put it because the more we talk about this, the more I'm thinking about like paradigm math and how to like do unions and intersections of different paradigms. But before I start doing that, because that's a level of logic and math that I don't think people care about that much, or I think the vast majority of people don't care that much about it or have any kind of understanding of that because it requires some esoteric topics. Um, we're gonna call it because we're getting low on time. I know you have things you have to
Yeah,
do later.
I do
Um,
have things to do.
but yeah, thank you everyone who stopped by. You're awesome. We care about you. We
Ooh.
hope you're good. If you want to say, hey, this is what my goal is for the next 3 weeks for my taking care of my spirit, my soul, my heart, whatever, however you want to quantify that thing, we're open to hearing for it. We want to hear what you're doing, what your goals are. If you reach them, good. We love that for you.
If you don't, tomorrow's another day.
Yeah.
Keep pushing forward. Keep trying to be better, 1 inch at a time, 1 step at a time,
Hey,
one
I
breath at a
posted on Twitter 3 times over the past week, and that was
time.
a goal that I had for myself. So we're
You're
making progress.
making
Um,
progress.
for the podcast, I'm the person who controls the podcast Twitter. But yeah, if you add us on Twitter or Instagram and say, hey, these are my goals, and they don't even have to be about the spirit. We do we're doing for the body and for
Body
the
and
mind.
mind too.
Today this is just the episode that we're talking about spirit. We're going to do it every 3 weeks. We're going to cycle through them. So next week we're going to talk about the mind. And I can say that the topic for next week is computer vision, because it's my turn to pick, and so these are the topics you get when I pick. We're going to be talking about some computer vision because it's what I've been taking a bit of a dive on lately. And what, like, our personal 3 week goal, just a little behind the scenes, is just the topic that we're going to do for the mind. It's unless we come up with something different, we're making it up as we go. But for now, our tri-weekly goal has been our topic for the mind. So that's our tri-weekly goal for the mind. Spoiler alert. But yeah, hit us with whatever on Twitter, Instagram, comment on YouTube. All for it.
All for it.
Do you have any last words?
I have no last words. This is why we need to talk about that.
All right. Well, then we're just gonna awkwardly end it and go to the outro.
Awkwardly ended.